Pride means recognizing, pride means discovering, pride means
Yay.
fighting, pride means working through, pride means humility, pride means freedom, pride means progress.
Hello, hello. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Cardinal.
Welcome.
Oh,
So another person to get to interview. So fun. Cardinal, you want to introduce yourself? Even though most of our audience knows you, but why don't you do a quick introduction before you dive into your stories?
they might not. So my name is Cardinal Marking. I use they, he pronouns. I am the editor, producer, helper of the Queer Relationships, Queer Joy podcast. And yeah, I'm very excited to be back on the pod today. Thank you too.
Yeah, super excited to hear and have you join, Cardinal. So, this idea of a coming out story actually is being rephrased a lot. You might have seen this as like a coming in or talking about how we as a community and individually came into ourselves, more into ourselves and into our queerness. And so, do you want to talk about your coming in story or your coming out story, however you want to label that for yourself?
Yeah. I think that coming in is actually really, really accurate, especially for my story. So I'm non binary, trans mass, pansexual, all the good in between binary bashing stuff, a walking paradox. And it took me a long, long time to recognize that. I was, in fact, one of the things that the little internalized transphobia in my brain is constantly saying is, well, you didn't know when you were a kid, so you must not actually be trans. And I know that that's not true. It's just that I spent 23 ish, 24 years just absolutely mashing down any part of myself. And what finally broke me, it's really hilarious. So it's very much from the I'm just a really, really enthusiastic ally to trans pipeline. Like, uh, and what finally broke me was watching, I don't even remember the name of the movie. It was some gay teenage romance movie with two gay cis boys, and I was watching it and I was bawling my eyes out because I realized that I was feeling some very intense gender envy. And that was after months and months of, at the stroke of midnight, almost every night, questioning my gender. And I realized that maybe cis people don't do that for extended periods of time. And so I had a nice little mini mental break while my image of myself and my ego had a little crack in it, totally falling apart, and realizing that who I had built myself up as is not who I really was. And that was a very difficult realization to come to. But I'm really glad that I got there because things are much better now. And I'm not done with my transition, and I probably will never be because I'm a fluid person. And yeah, so that's, and then the classic thinking that coming out on Facebook means I won't have to come out ever again or tell anyone my pronouns ever again. Wrong,
Yeah.
wrong, wrong. It's going to be a lifetime of actually it's they, them, they, them. So yeah, it was coming into myself and then a constant coming out to everyone in the world around us because not a lot of people know what non-binary is still. And yeah, I guess a lot of my feelings center more around my gender than my sexuality. My sexuality in relation to gender is just like that's just an afterthought. That's not really something I think about that much. Just like I'm just attracted to the person. I don't really factor in much else. Mhm.
Yeah.
With where you are now in the integration coming in process, What would you say pride means to you? And maybe this year is different than other years. Maybe it's been constant.
Yeah. So pride means to me working through that internalized homophobia and transphobia and accepting myself as who I am. So pride means that internal pride. Pride means discovering that my insurance covers gender confirming treatments. And pride means
Yay.
fighting to make sure that everyone has that privilege.
Yeah.
Pride means progress as a community. It means working on our shit all together and leaving no one behind because we don't have it all figured out yet. We're still working on the language. Pride means the humility to admit when you're wrong because our community is so broad that we always have things to learn about gender and sexuality. Pride means the freedom to experience joy. And in order to have joy, we have to have safety first. And pride means recognizing yourself and others when they're brave enough to show themselves and having people recognize themselves when you're brave enough to show your true colors. So that's what pride means to me. Hey, it's Cardinal, your behind the scenes buddy, and I am back behind the scenes here to give you a little context on this next coming out clip. What you're about to hear is a portion of Melissa and Keely's interview with Gretchen and Kayla back from season 1. I think it's episode 10. The episode is called Learning the Ropes if you want to listen to the full thing. It's about the romance that grew when a vanilla gal met a full-time kinkster. Enjoy.
I was at a time in my life where I had a lot that I realized I needed to come out about. I had been dating people in the kink community and in the polyamorous community, and I'm a sex educator and I work in personal training and in sex education, and I'd been dating people that knew me through that work. So then it was just like, yeah, I'm bisexual. I was like, I'm a sex educator. I XYZ, like those kinds of things were a little more run of the mill, or people already knew them. And then entering this date, I was like, had this moment where I was raised in a really affirming place for my gender and my sexuality. I never really had a big coming out moment. And I had one of these moments of being like, what if she's not okay with all of these things of who I am and what I am?
Oh, yeah, that's real.
Yeah, instead of just, what I had, my own thoughts and judgments in my head of being like, what is a normal person going on a date, showing up and being like, I work in IT. I was divorced 3 years ago. Here's my cat. I
I especially then, I probably still would say I'm pretty vanilla in that regard. I'm pretty I don't know. I was just kind of being a basic white girl who's kind of like into other women. And then I didn't really know. So that was what I was coming into our date. Needless to say, for me, it was a wild ride.
I was wondering, like, how did the coming out go? What was your response? Like, had you heard these words before?
Are you a West Side lesbian?
We
I mean,
she was one anecdote from this date that really points out how it went.
So, okay. You can see, like, I probably was wearing this shirt, honestly, but Gretchen was like, I was like very nervous, and I don't know if you can tell, but like, I'm not usually very nervous. I'm pretty smooth. And no, I was so nervous, and I didn't know anything about Gretchen at all. And the first thing, we were sitting at the bar, and they were like, you can touch me if you want. And I was like, I don't know.
For listeners who can't see, she's just like just going backwards and like, oh my goodness.
I was very nervous. And then at one point it was like Gretchen pulled the moves out, which was, we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll get to that. Uncharacteristic. And so
That's being bold.
Yeah,
I don't know.
brought us over and was like, we're going to go to a booth. Do you want to, what did you say?
I said, do you want to sit on opposite sides like we're dating, or on the same side like we're in love? Chose same side.
I don't think I had a choice. I sat down and Gretchen plopped their legs on me, which were at the bar, and was doing like a bisexual, I can't sit, so I'm putting my legs up. And I was like fidgeting because I'm so nervous, and it has a little anklet, and I was like, oh, cute. Thought I was asking an innocent question, like, what's this anklet? And then she hit me with, oh, that's my rope family. And I was like climbing, like I'm a climber. And I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, but then I learned about.
Yeah, she learned about my bondage family and how I have a family of people that I travel and teach rope bondage with, and that we have symbols of our commitment to each other. And it's really not what she was expecting to get into with like, oh, cute jewelry. And yeah.
That's so. How did you, when you were hearing that from Gretchen, what was going on in your mind, in your vanilla mind?
Oh, vanilla mind was really trying to play it cool, but holy smokes. I think I was freaking out. I got back and like, many in my circles knew, of course, you asked out Gretchen. I was like, I know, right? She said yes. And so I was like psyched. And then everyone was very surprised. I have one acquaintance who is a mutual friend. And I went out to coffee and I was like, listen, I went on a date with Gretchen. And they were like, Gretchen? I was like, yeah, like I think the Gretchen you know. And they're like, you went on a date with Gretchen. And I was like, yes. And they're like, you, Kayla, who I know. I'm like, exactly. And they've just really had the delight that they took, and the mashing of the two of us was really lovely because I had no idea. And the things I've learned in the past 3 years have been super cool and transformative. And I love to think back and like remember my baby brain that was like mind blown. And all of my, not all of my friends, but many of my friends also were like, what is suspension rope bondage? Like, what are you talking about? And then, so all of those types of new learnings that have come up for me, I don't know that I'm proud of myself, but I'm surely grateful that I was just like, I'm going to learn. And I don't think I had any judgments. I had maybe some.
If you did, you kept them to yourself.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome, Garrison. We get to have our listeners listen and learn more about you and your story. And we'll just have you jump in and introduce yourself and then go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a therapy trainee and I am a cis white gay man. And I also really like using the term queer to refer to myself because I like the expansiveness that it sort of gives me to play around with facets of my identity and to not be so locked in, I think, to a really binary like gender discussion of the kind of person that I should be. So that's some of the intersection that I come from. And it is now Pride Month, which is also, it's so exciting. It's so exciting. I have, I think, some complex feelings about Pride, but I think I never went to Pride when I was a teenager. And I'm from a suburb of Portland. I come from the East County out in Gresham, which is considerably less open, or at least was when I was a kid, than Portland is. And I didn't really see any queer people. I don't remember seeing any queer people around me. I don't remember having any queer role models. And so when I started going to Pride, when I got to undergrad and started living in Portland, I just remember feeling this sense of total and complete elation that here I am, I'm like in downtown Portland. It's scorching hot in June, like burning hot outside. And here's all these people who are just celebrating left and right about their queerness. It felt so opening to me and so welcoming that I was like, oh, here's this part of my identity that has never been recognized or at best has been tolerated by the people around me. And people are celebrating it. And so I think it really filled me with a lot of joy. And now it still does, honestly. Going to Pride, even if I'm just like taking a bus downtown and seeing pride floats and seeing queer elders and seeing people dressed up in all rainbows. It feels like such a celebration to me. Yeah. And then there's a flip side of this too, which is that I know that I come from a generation that has always understood pride as a celebration and not really as a revolution. And so the more that I learn about queer history and the more that I get that information and it becomes available to me, the more I also understand this sort of like push and pull that I feel like we start to see now in like queer events during Pride Month, where there's this sort of like corporate element and this like mainstream element, which I think comes with a lot of like recognition for like how far the queer community has come. And I think there is also like a little bit of erasure of exactly how Pride started. And that we've seen that in media with sort of the whitewashing of the Stonewall riots and that Stonewall movie that came out, and the real celebration mostly of like family friendly queerness, right? Like no kink at Pride, no leather at Pride. Sometimes people don't want to see that stuff. But I know that a lot of that is really cemented in our history, and that information about it is not always easy to come by. Queer history isn't always offered to us. But yeah, so I think there's two sides to the coin.
I love that you bring in both those pieces, the celebration and the revolution, and this has been a theme in some of our other interviews, but we're still in that place today. We're still needing to stand up and revolt and fix things and change things. So thank you for commenting on that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Would you say you have a coming out or a coming in story? I know you didn't have a lot of representation in Gresham. Pride in
Mm.
Portland seems like it was this like wonderful experience. Did you always know about your queerness?
I think I had a sense very early on that I was different. I had a pretty strict and explicit like masculinization. I was a really effeminate child, but that was just a no-go in my family origin. So even though I would say that my parents were pretty welcoming and pretty open to the idea of me at least not being straight, there's still this sort of like heteropatriarchal undercurrent that really sort of undergirded my coming out. Yeah. So I think my family sort of knew at an early age that I was not going to be straight. And so I didn't really have to come out to my parents, which was nice. But I spent most of my teen years not trying to hide who I was, really trying to not be who I was. So really seeing if there's a way that I could make myself heterosexual, because I sort of came from like the Christian roots, and just the combination of that and the heteropatriarchal sort of understanding of like what a man is supposed to look like and really what the rules of being a man are supposed to be. There's no room for queerness in that as far as I understood it. So for me, it was when I got to undergrad, and it really like I was saying earlier, I wasn't really exposed to queerness in Gresham. I'm sure that there is queerness, there's queerness thriving everywhere, but it was just not something that I had come across. When I got to undergrad and I started to see more queer forms of expression and more gay people who were like out and proud and living happy lives, I was like, oh, actually, maybe that's something that I could be invested in and something that I could claim for myself. And so I ended up coming out at Lewis and Clark when I was a resident advisor there to my staff team first. They were very supportive and welcoming. And then to my other friends, and I got sort of mixed responses to some extent. And I just remember feeling so euphoric for like almost the whole next year after that. It was so freeing. It felt so liberating to me. And then about around a year or so, or sometime like 6 months to a year into it, after having come out at Lewis and Clark, I decided that I was going to write a letter to everybody in my extended family. And I come from sort of two, like a Christian and a Catholic background on each side of my family. And I wrote a letter and I talked about how for me, it was like, if I could have chosen, I would have been a heterosexual person, right? It was something that I wanted more than anything, something that I prayed for, something that I tried really hard to claim for myself, and it didn't work, and it was really painful. And I wrote about that in my letter, and I got, again, sort of mixed responses. I didn't anticipate that people would be open to me at all in my extended family, but I actually got some really wonderful and loving responses as well. It was sort of like, we're going to love you no matter what. And then the other dividend that sort of paid to me was that there are other queer people in my family who have also now sort of come out to some extent and who I have closer bonds with. Like I have a queer uncle who sort of lives in multi-generational housing with my mom and my brother, and I have a couple of queer cousins. And it's been wonderful to get to know them and that piece of their identity as well. Yeah.
So cool to be able to bond that way.
Mhm.
Well, we also like to ask people about queer joy, and it may be pride, but perhaps there's something else in the last week or month that is just bringing you joy.
Oh, well, the first thing that comes to mind is that I was actually just at Pivot, which is a queer healthcare site. And I go there every once in a while and have my own sort of internal debate about like whether it's for me, like, am I am I the queer person who this is supposed to be for? But I'm also a grad student and I have student loans. So I'm like, I'm going to excuse this for myself for now. And going there and getting queer healthcare from people who really care about the queer community, and it really is like palpable. I was just like sitting down in that office and there's an older gay man and a younger lesbian woman who's training, and just like the way that they're asking about like what I'm doing for Pride and the things that I've experienced and how completely open they were with me and how non-judgmental the space felt about my sexuality and like how my sexuality has been embodied and how my sexual health is doing it. I think it's sort of the same feeling that I've experienced. It's sort of like, this is not something that I expect to be like an opening conversation, because I've had plenty of other experiences where my healthcare is treated as a sort of marginalized thing, right? Like oh, well, here's like your sex and your sex doesn't fit into sort of the procreative heterosexual like pyramid of who we value sexually. So even just earlier today, to be able to talk to other queer people and just feel free, that was joyful for me.
Amazing.
Hey, well, thank you so much, Garrison, for sharing. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Sweet. Okay. Thank you so much, you two. Thank you for inviting me on.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Everyone, thank you for listening. And you know how to get a hold of us through Connective Therapy Collective on Instagram, all Facebook, all the things. And I hope that you all have a joyful queer week.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective, hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSeguran. I'm your producer, Cardinal Marking. Audio is edited by Mars Gasper. Intro music is by Bad Sex. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify. Or send us an email at info@connectivetherapycollective.com. For more queer joy, visit our website at www.connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.